have to simplify this. If you have negatives under your radicals, what can you take out? So we could go ahead and take out an I. Alright, so what happens to those i's? Because the 15 and the 153 are both under the square root, we could go ahead and reduce those. Are they divisible by anything? 3. So 15 divided by 3 is 5. 153 divided by 3, 51. Now, what do we have to do? Have to get the radical off the bottom. So we multiply top and bottom by radical 51. So we get radical 255 over radical 51 times radical 51 is just a 51. So you would check to see if you can break down radical 255, but you cannot. No perfect squares go into it. So that is our final answer. So number 2. This one is similar, but we have to do something. What has to be the first step here? Okay. Yes. If you just multiply those top radicals, you get the square root of 12. And that is wrong. Before you multiply, you have to take out the I. So square root of negative 6 would be I radical 6 times the square root of negative 2, so I radical 2 over radical 3. So if we multiply, we get I squared radical 12 over radical 3. What is I squared? Because the radical 12 and radical 3, they're both under a radical, so technically you could even just go ahead and divide them at this point. So 12 divided by 3 is 4, so we have negative 1 times the square root of 4, so that gives us a negative 2. If you did not take out that I, you would have gotten a positive 2. So that's where you would have put wrong. Is that okay? Number 6. So for proper notation, we are not allowed to have a radical or an I or a radical in the denominator. So we have to get that I out. If all you did was multiply by an I, it would just make it 2I minus 1 or minus negative 1. So it doesn't help. What do we have to multiply by? Yes, the conjugate.
I almost want to say opposite reciprocal. Even though that'd be like a fraction.
No, it's the opposite. Okay. So we have to FOIL. So we get negative 6 minus 3I plus 8I plus 4I squared. Denominator we get 4 plus 2I and minus 2I drop minus I squared. We know that I squared is negative 1, so 4I squared is the same as negative 4. So that's negative 4 plus negative 6 is negative 10. Negative 3I plus 8I is 5I. Since I squared is negative 1, so 4 minus negative 1, positive 5. So then we divide. i's, we need to break this up. So negative 10 over 5 is negative 2 plus 5i divided by 5 is I. Negative 2 plus I. So you guys are all okay with 10 and 11? Answering all the questions about the quadratic, whether it's written in standard form or vertex form. So we are solving our quadratics here. And I kind of left it up to you on which method you want to do. So first step when we are dealing with quadratics would be what? So let's bring over that 4. Then what could we do? Yeah, we probably try slip and slide next. There's no Gray's common factor. Make sure if you are doing slip and slide, you always pull out that Gray's common factor first. So if we did this, is there anything that multiplies to negative 12 and adds to negative 6? No. So if slip and slide fails, we have two options. What are the two things that work no matter what? Quadratic formula and completing the square. Since I didn't specify you could do either, I'll work both of them out just to show you. Quadratic formula, I really kind of expect you to know on this test. We've used it a lot at this point, so hopefully you guys are familiar with that. So it's x equals opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So if you don't know that, write it down and study that tonight. So opposite of b is negative 6, so it'd be positive 6, plus or minus the square root, negative 6 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 4. Over 2 times 3. So negative 6 squared is 36, minus 4 times 3 times negative 4 will become a positive 48. Okay, break down our radical. What goes into 84? Bring it forward 2. And then final step is to reduce. All of these are divisible by 2. So you could write your answer as 3 plus or minus the square root of 21 over 3. Or if you broke it apart, 6 over 6 is 1 plus or minus radical 21 over 3. So either of those is okay.
During the test, do you want us to have it as simplified as it can be?
Yes.
Okay. And do you have a preference on which one of those two?
It doesn't matter unless there's an I in it. So if there's an I, you have to go with the second one where you break it apart. But otherwise, I don't care. Just as a refresher, let's do this with completing the square.
That's what I did.
You completed the square?
I think I
avoid
got it wrong.
completing the square as much as possible.
Okay. If you want to complete the square, what has to be true about A?
Yeah, this would be one.
Has to be a positive one. So we would first divide everything by 3. We always move our constant to the other side. So then we do middle term divided by 2 squared. So negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. Squared is positive 1. So we add 1 each side. Alright, this is a perfect square. So it would be x. What multiplies to 1 and adds to negative 2? 4/3 plus 1. Square root plus and minus. So we have x minus 1 equals plus and minus. This is like the square root of 7 over the square root of 3. Is that okay? No, we have to get the radical off the bottom. And then your final step, you add your 1. So we get 1 plus and minus radical 21 over 3.
I was looking at the number too, like, how did I get I?
Magic.
So, same answer, 2 different ways. And unless I specifically said you had to use 1, it would not matter. Any questions on that one? Let's look at 7.
This one is useless.
Alright, is there any gray's common factor? No, so if we try slip and slide. What multiplies to 100 and adds to negative 20? But then what do we have to do? We started out multiplying by 4, so we divide by 4. So 10 over 4 reduces to 5 over 2, so that's 2x minus 5. Set that to 0. So we get 5 halves. Since it came up twice, we write multiplicity 2.
And you said you would those written exactly like that.
My beautiful brain last night was thinking, nothing multiplies to 100 and adds to 20. So I did quadratic formula.
But you got the same answer,
I'm
didn't you?
surprised I didn't.
Minus the
Well,
multiplicity
Canada was
too.
way off.
Yeah, so in the quadratic formula, how you know it has a multiplicity of 2 is you end up with something plus or minus the square root of 0, right?
Mhm.
So you have 5 plus the square root of 0, so 5 plus 0 over 2 is 5 halves. 5 minus 0 over 2 is 5 halves. So we get it
Okay.
both times. So that's where the multiplicity comes in.
Okay.
18. So if I want to set it equal to 0, we add the x, add the 1. Is there anything that multiplies to 1 and adds to 1? No. So what are my two options? Alright, let's try it both ways. So if we did quadratic. And again, you're picking your method, I don't care.
Are you gonna do that on test too?
So opposite of b would be a negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 squared minus 4 times 1 times 1 all over 2 times 1. So 1 minus 4 is negative 3. So what would you do?
You could get the
And then because this one has an I, you do have to go ahead and split it up. So we would say negative 1/2 plus and minus the I radical 3 over 2.
Yeah, I was right.
let's talk complete square. So completing the square, we have a coefficient of 1. Move the constant to the other side. So middle term divided by 2 squared would be 1/4. So this factors into what multiplies to 1/4 and adds to 1? -1 plus 1/4 is -3/4. Square root, plus and minus. Square root of -3, that would be I radical 3. Square root of 4 is 2. Subtract the 1. So both of them gets. Oh, it's not that
I
bad.
hate working with fractions.
You do?
So much. But it's also because you saw how last time we had fractions and I was like, I can't find the fraction button.
Yeah, that might have something to do with it. You can just do a division.
Or hear me out, I can just give you this piece. It worked the last time. It's the
We
best
should
I
like
did on
make
the
it where
test.
she can't do decimals,
know.
so she learns how to use a calculator.
But I don't, hear me out.
They
Would
both
you
are
rather,
good.
hear me out, you're out in public and you have to do math. Are you just gonna whip a calculator out of nowhere?
Phones are amazing.
You don't have one. That's the point I'm making right now.
Alright,
Really
let's do
please.
some math here.
New York's the only place
So-
where they have you do a math question out in public.
Probability.
What would I have to do here?
That one, this is.
So we start these inequalities out just like the equations. Okay, so then we ask ourselves what multiplies -14 and adds to +5. So it would be a +7 minus 2. If we set those equal to 0, we get x to be -7 and +2. That's when it equals 0. I am expecting a little work here. If you just write down your final answer from this, I'm not going to necessarily know that you knew what you were doing. So I want a picture. These are the 2 points where if you graphed it, it would hit the x-axis. If I draw the number line like this, does that confuse you guys? Would you rather I draw an xy grid? Or you understand what I'm talking about when I do this? So this is where it's equal to 0. If we think about this, it was a quadratic. Look right here. It was a positive x squared, so our quadratic is opening up. And most of these will get to that point because even if it was a negative x squared, what would you do first? Multiply by the negative to make it a positive. Okay, then we look at the inequality. So we are testing when it is greater than 0. So this line represents equal to 0. So greater than 0 is anywhere we were above. Because there's no equal to, it's all parentheses, so you're giving me those intervals. So from -infinity to -7, union 2 to infinity. Does everyone understand how I get from that number line to my graph? Let's look at 24. So, normally, if this were just an equation, you would probably do square root method, but let's try to avoid that with the inequalities. What can I do instead? How do you factor x squared minus 25?
That's 5x plus 5.
You can't.
It's Monday and I am like seriously.
Okay, so the things that make it equal 0 are positive and negative 5. So So if we think about this graph, that's when it's equal to. We had x squared minus 25, so that's just our parabola opening up. We wanted less than 0. So less than means under the line.
That's my
Equal to means bracket, so that would be -5 to +5.
So what would, I forget, what do we do if there's like multiplicity, like with our answers?
So that's a very good question. Let's say I gave you alright, so I give you this one. So if we start by factoring, what multiplies to 4 and adds to negative? So we get x equals 2 is our only point where it equals 0. Right? This parabola opens up. So if I want to know when this was less than 0, where was it below the axis? Never. So no solution. What if I asked when it was less than or equal to 0?
Would that be 2?
It would just be 2. Only that point. What if I asked where it was greater than 0? What if I asked greater than or equal to 0?
Just be random positive.
Yeah, you could just say everywhere. It's always greater than or equal to. So it'll depend on the inequality that I'm asking, but your answers will look a little bit different if you are getting the same answer twice with the multiplicity. You're welcome. Any other questions related to that? And 25. What would you do first? Alright, and we would like to do slip and slide, but before I do slip and slide, what do I have to do? Okay. And anytime you multiply or divide by a negative, what happens? Now we can do slip and slide. We have to divide our 2. So we get x minus 4, 2x plus 1, less than 0. Set those to 0 and we get positive 4, negative 1 half. Okay, that's where it equals 0. And from this point, the graph you draw kind of depends on which step you look at. If I looked at this one right here, does that parabola open up or down? Down. And at that step I wanted greater than, which is above. And there's no equal to, so we would have the negative 1/2 positive 4. If you looked at the next step, if you use this one to draw your graph, it would have been facing upward, but you would have been looking for less than, which is still below the graph. So you just have to pick which line you're looking at to draw that. Alright, are we okay on those quadratic inequalities? The height of a baseball in feet after t seconds is given by this. So part A, what is S of 2.5? What is that asking us to do?
2.5 for t.
So you put that in your calculator and you get 14. Now keep in mind, 2.5 was the seconds, so 14 is my feet. You should be able to put some labels on this. So said our height was in feet. And then if I say interpret, I want you to write a sentence. So this is like an order pair. So after 2.5 seconds, the height was 14.
I think I entered it wrong because I don't know why I got 214.
Oh, I'd say you dropped the negative on your 16.
Maybe that, or I might have, like, for some reason put 25 in there somewhere. Instead
That's
of 2.5.
possible as well. Alright, B, after how many seconds did it reach its max? Anytime I ask you for a maximum or minimum, what are you being asked to find? Vertex. How do we find a vertex? Alright, this gives us the x value, or in this case the t. So negative 44 over 2 times negative 32. So that turned out to be 1.375. That was my time, which is seconds. And that's what it asked, how many seconds. And then part C wants to know what's the maximum height. So we know the time. All we have to do is plug that into the height equation. It's just asking for the y value of the vertex. And if we do that, we get 4.25. Oh. I mean, if it's like extending on, yeah, that's fine. I think I just left it because it ended after the 5, so it was easy enough to carry them. So as long as you have all the work to justify it, it would probably be okay. Are we okay on that? Last question we asked about, probably the one you guys need more than any other on here, if I had to guess. A homeowner needs to build a fence for the dog in the backyard. The yard is rectangular in shape. And no fence will be placed along the house. So what does that mean? So we have a rectangle, but we're only putting fence on 3 of those sides. So we've done several of these problems involving rectangles. And sometimes we're talking about all 4 sides. Sometimes we're only talking about 3. You just have to read your problem and see. Okay. The homeowner only has enough money budgeted to purchase 110 feet of fence. What does that represent? I don't know the distance around. Okay, so I don't know this side, so if I called it X, we know the opposite side is the same. What would I call this one? So we know if we add all of those, it equals 110. And if I hadn't said we weren't putting fence along the side, or along that one side, it would be 2x plus 2y equals 110. So you kind of have to watch your problem. We want the dimensions that will provide the maximum area. How do you find area of a rectangle? Length times width, x times y. Okay. We know if I ask for maximum, I'm asking for a vertex. We need a quadratic before we can do that. And we need only one variable. So we have to get rid of this y. So we use our perimeter equation. If we solve for y, so my area is x times 110 minus 2x. Or if you distribute, that's 110x minus 2x squared. Then I ask for a maximum. What am I asking you to find? Vertex. How do we find it? So we get 27.5. Okay, my questions were for the dimensions. So that's x and y. So to find y, we know it's 110 minus 2 times x. So that's 55. Word problem we can answer in a sentence. So the fence should be. feet by 55 feet. The short side that we have two of, that's our 27.5. The side we only